going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about our preseason recruiting strategy and what you want to do whenever you're setting up your recruiting boards, specifically points-wise, that's going to benefit you going into your recruiting season within College Football 25 dynasties. Moving my camera here for a moment, you can see that as Akron, I'm starting out with 500 recruiting hours, and that does not seem like a lot, especially compared to many of the schools within College Football 25. But you can do quite a bit of work with 500 recruiting hours within College Football 25 within preseason. You're going to be limited in season with what you can do. And this dynasty specifically, we are limiting ourselves in our first season to recruiting 3 stars and below. So that's why you're going to see me targeting a bunch of 3 stars. No 4 stars or anything above that. But you can still get away with targeting some 4 stars, and depending on what team you are, some 5 stars. If you're a higher end team, mainly 5 stars and 4 stars. So you're going to have a lot of flexibility, especially with those higher end teams. But really, the main point that I want to get to in today's video, and I'm going to get it out of the way here first, is the simple fact of how many recruiting hours you actually need in order to offer a scholarship to every single player within your recruiting pool initially, and what that leaves you left over. It is a very simple fact, but it frees up so much flexibility for the way you plan your preseason recruiting. And if you haven't thought of it this way, trust me, it is a major game changer for what you're going to do setting up your recruiting board and how you operate. So how many recruiting points does it actually take to offer a scholarship to 35 players? Well, it's 5 points times 35 players, which is 175 recruiting points, which means that if you understand that every single time you set up your recruiting board, if you're going to fill it with 35 players and offer every single one of them a scholarship, or maybe you'll fill up your board, scout a little bit, eliminate some players here and there, and then get it back up to 35, and you're going to offer 35 scholarships. It's going to take you 175 recruiting points. And I know it sounds so simple, but it's a concept that I know a lot of CFB users have not thought of whenever they're going into their preseason recruiting. But it makes a massive change in the way that you can strategize with the rest of the points that you have available to you. So if I'm a team like Akron that has 500 recruiting points, well, 500 minus 175, I now know that I have 325 recruiting points left to work with in order to scout the rest of the players within my recruiting pool. Well, what does that do for me? That changes my mentality completely. Instead of just kind of going at it willy-nilly and saying maybe I need this position, I'm going to scout a whole bunch of players at that position, or maybe I'll load up wide receiver with 10 different players and scout them all the way down and find out which players are the best, and then I'll backfill, and then I'll offer scholarships after that. It creates a very sound methodology to what you're going to do. You need to know that you're saving those 175 points. And if you're really going to go after wide receivers, you can't go absolutely crazy on them. It takes me 3 times to scout receivers within this dynasty. So that's 30 points per player. I can only really scout 10-ish players at any given position. And so that then informs me as to what I need to do. Well, if I'm taking over as Akron, I need to know more than just receivers. I can't afford to scout 10 receivers and find the best ones, especially when I don't know that I'm going to be able to get all of those 10 players heading into my recruiting season with a bottom-end school like this. So, okay, maybe I'll scout 3 to 5 players at the receiver position until I find a couple that are good, and then I'm going to cut it off there. I scouted, I think it was 4 players at the receiver position here. I found 2 gems. They're not the best players in the world. I'm trying something a little bit different here with my recruiting strategy and developmental strategy. I'm not going for straight speed, just to see how it works out. And I'm pretty happy with being able to target these couple of players. I can come back later and find some other players to potentially target. I still have to scout Josh Bean all the way here, but that leaves me at a pretty happy spot and then gives me a bunch of points left over to scout. As an example, the quarterback position, which is also absolutely crucial for a build like Akron here, where I also did the same thing. I scouted about 3 to 5 players. I eliminated a couple of them. I'll be pretty happy to be able to grab 1 or 2 of these players at this position. Was I able to scout much at any other position? No. But those are 2 of the most important positions that I'm going to be able to go after here, and they are kind of limited on what I'm actually able to go after. On the defensive side of the ball, on the offensive line, there's a lot of players that I like here, and some of them are going to turn out to be pretty solid for me. So I don't have too much of an issue with just kind of doing a throw a bunch of darts at the wall and see what sticks type of method with certain positions such as that. But with the most crucial positions, I'm going to be able to now approach it strategically. And instead of what happens a lot of times with me, which is I go a little bit overboard with receivers and then I come back to maybe the quarterback position as an example, and I can only scout 1 of these guys or 2 of these guys because I didn't plan accordingly, and I didn't think about the fact that I have to commit those 175 hours. And then what does it actually take to scout those players? 30-ish hours per. I can only scout so many players before I hit my limit. And like I said, this opens up quite a bit whenever you get to some of those higher end teams that have 900, 1,000 plus hours. And then you can really go kind of crazy with scouting. And whenever you have upgraded coaches and upgraded assistant coaches that allow scouting to go quicker, then you can really go nuts with your scouting in the preseason. But again, understanding that you have to allocate those 175 period is going to then give you the number that you have to work with for the rest of your players, and you can then strategize and you can kind of divvy it up between the most important positions to you. If it is absolutely crucial with your dynasty that you find a quarterback, then you're going to be able to say, okay, well, what's my second most important position? Let me make sure that I leave 60 or 90 or 120 points left over for that secondary position, and I'm going to use everything else on quarterback. And once I get down to that 120 plus the 175 that I have left over, then I'm going to step aside and say, okay, we're done with the quarterback position. We're going to work with what we got. We're next going to go to the second most important position, spend that 120, decide from there what is what. Maybe I eliminate a couple players from my board. Maybe I bring on a couple more players. Maybe I leave it as is. Then I allocate my 175, offering a scholarship to every single player. I'm going to be in a much more strategic place that's going to set us up for success going into our recruiting season. Oftentimes, I feel like college football users tend to overlook the preseason phase, and it's not necessarily that they're not scouting or they're not offering scholarships or whatever it might be. It's just that there isn't a whole lot of strategy there. It's just that, hey, I have a bunch of points. Hey, I can't spend them all to offer scholarships. I can't invest points in recruiting those players yet, except for offering the scholarship. So the scouting is kind of secondary unless I can really go find like a 99 speed player or something crazy like that. It is very minor in terms of just overall concept, but simply having a little bit of a grasp of that potential strategy there can be a huge difference maker. And for me personally, it has changed the way in recent dynasties that I've looked at recruiting in general and set things up from the beginning. And I've been much more happy with it. And I've come away with players that fit my team a little bit better, that fit what I'm trying to do a little bit better, and that turn out to, in my personal opinion, develop better as players, as opposed to me just throwing 35 players at the wall and hoping that I generate interest on them. Of course, that is still the same strategy that I've recommended to you guys, which is to put the best players on there that you possibly can and get as much interest in those high-end players as early as possible. But again, you can kind of build upon that strategy and elaborate upon that and become a little bit more advanced with your recruiting capabilities and your potential for success by simply, as I said, understanding that it takes 175 hours to allocate a scholarship to those 35 players total. That one little bit of information informs so much else with recruiting. And if you haven't been thinking about that whenever you're setting up your recruiting boards, try it. Let me know in the comment section if it makes an impact for you guys. Because for me, just mentally speaking, it made a massive impact on how I was approaching things. And if you guys have already been really taking that into account, certainly let me know that in the comment section below as well. I'd love to hear that. So leave that feedback down below. Subscribe if you haven't, leave a like, and comment in the comment section. As always, I'll see you in the next video. and I hope you have a good one.